Good afternoon, everyone. Many of us in this room, I'm guessing, know exactly what it's like to have that Sunday night experience before your children go back to school on Monday morning for a new school year. Right? It's that experience that every single year it's like the same experience. There's some nervousness and anxiety. Right? The kids can't fall asleep, and they're talking a mile a minute. And it's also this excitement. It's a new year, it's a new opportunity. You know, my son says I'm not going to mess it up this year. You know, and so there's this excitement and this nervousness, and that was exactly what happened in our house this past weekend and early this week as my kids went back to school. And to take it a step farther, my son was excited. He was the one that was excited this year, and that's not usually the case. Especially going into 10th grade, you never know what you're going to get. And he was excited that he was getting a new Spanish teacher. Right? That was the level of excitement that he cared most about. And the night before he went to school, he thought that was going to solve his problems in Spanish, and that, you know, the problems that he experienced last year in Spanish, and that resulted in the entire family experiencing challenges in Spanish night after night. That would all be solved with his new teacher. So he was excited. And my daughter, on the first morning of school, we actually kind of had the opposite, a little nervous energy going on. And the way that played out is she started packing these Ziploc baggies full of little snacks, whatever she could scrounge up, you know, peanuts or Doritos or whatever. She kind of squirrels away the little bags of Doritos in places. And she started packing them up, and I thought, I'm not really sure why she's doing this, and it turned out that her nervousness played out around her friendships and wanting to ensure that she got off on the right foot with a new class. And none of her friends from last year in her class this year, and so she was bringing the snack bags as a, you know, sit down at the lunchroom table, offer up a snack bag, and maybe I'll make a friend here. It turned out that evening that my son walked into the Spanish classroom and it was full immersion Spanish, and they didn't speak a word of English, and his excitement went to nervousness. And my daughter came home that first night, and for her, she was incredibly proud that she took risks and spoke out in class and wasn't shy, and handed out those little baggies. So the nervousness and the excitement were both there, and then they flip-flopped. And I tell that story because it's real for thousands and thousands of children right now. It's real for their parents who are experiencing them coming home from school. And it is real for every single one of our educators in the state right now. We are in a time that we could say maybe the most amount of change that our educators have experienced in decades. That you could make a pretty strong argument that if you were a teacher a couple of years ago and you're a teacher now, all of the systems around you have changed. The way you're evaluated has changed. The way you meet with other teachers and what happens in those meetings has changed. Your access to data, the systems you use around the data, and your ability to use it with your students has completely changed. And the way that we measure our schools and our students has changed as well. There's very little that is the same about the systems around our teachers. And of course, what's always the same is that it's students and it's teachers and it's that relationship and it's that classroom. And we all know that that's a commonality. But it is important to recognize that we are absolutely in a time of systems change in this state, and that change touches all of our teachers, all of our principals, and all of our educators throughout the state. And I'll talk a little bit about that change, but before I do, it's worth noting right off the bat that we are seeing results, tangible results, from these improvements that we are making, from these changes that we are making. And the most exciting result of recent is that we have more than 10,000 students in our state right now who scored proficient levels in math and reading this past year when compared to the year before. More than 10,000 additional students scoring at that level. And in some grade levels and in some subgroups and in some subject areas, the numbers are even higher. So what's important about that, not only is the tangible results for our children who came home with better reading skills and math skills at the end of last year, but I think just as importantly, that helps to build momentum with all of the people implementing these changes. That if we don't see results with all of these changes and positive results, it is hard to keep momentum. And so we have some momentum. And to take it one step farther, we have partnership zone schools in our state. Many of us have read about these. They appear in the newspaper a lot. These were our lowest performing schools in the state. There are now 10 of them that we are helping very significantly with resources, with new leadership, with a complete, in some cases, complete redoing of how they think about school. Right? And those 4 initial schools in that group, every single one of them outpaced the state in their growth. And one of them now, 4 blocks from here, now actually outperforms state averages. In a year and a half from being one of the lowest performing schools in the entire state to now outperforming the state average, year and a half. Right? Those are stories you rarely hear. And having worked around the country in the last half dozen years, I can tell you that you can count those stories on one hand. So there's some exciting momentum. I'd like to talk for a couple of minutes about a couple of the key initiatives that people are experiencing that you'll read about, that we hear about. I'd like to make a pitch to you, and then I'd like to open up for questions, because this is a topic that I know an incredible number of people in this room not only care deeply about, but are directly involved in. Quite humbling, actually, to be up here and know that I'm surrounded by many of the school leaders, either past or present, and honoring those people who are doing work day to day, hoping that I am supporting them in that. So a couple of the pieces, and I'll highlight it as we have 4 major areas that we're doing work in right now, really significant improvement work. The first area is in our data systems. And we just got a new longitudinal data system grant for over $4 million to expand that work. We are one of the #1 states in the country in terms of our data infrastructure. In fact, 10 years ago when I was a principal in Maryland, I read a report from the Data Quality Campaign that was touting Delaware as being one of the best states in terms of their underlying data and their infrastructure and what we had access to as educators, as researchers. Right? We just got more money to expand that work, and most importantly, to let that work live with our teachers. Give teachers access to data on their students. How are the students doing, and how can we improve their outcomes? We have to provide that information. That's one major area that we're doing work. A second is around our standards. Many of you know and have read about the Common Core State Standards. This was an initiative that was launched by the Governors Association years ago, where states came together and said, this is crazy that we have some states who have standards here and some states that have standards here, that the performance is all over the map, and we don't have a way to have a common platform of standards, and we certainly can't measure across states because everybody's given different tests, and everybody has different rigor in their standards. So the governors said enough, and they organized around this, and we are now in the process of implementing those standards. That's a major change. That'll happen over the next 2 years, and we're moving to a new set of assessments related to those set of standards. Another big bunch of work. A third bunch of work that is very significant is turning around our lowest performing schools. In this state, it is 10 schools, most specifically, that we are putting incredible efforts into, incredible resources into. 6 of them are starting their first year of implementation this year, and 4 from last year that I just talked about. We think about the thousands of students in those 10 schools who over the past set of years have really struggled or plateaued in their performance. And this is about raising that up, providing those students with an experience that is rich and rigorous, and that when they go home, their parents smile and are happy not only with the culture of the school, but also with the expectations and the subsequent achievement of their kids. And the final area that I'd end with, to touch on for a minute, which is, in my mind, it's the most important area because it focuses on the people who are most important day to day in our schools. And it is the area about driving improvements for our teachers and our leaders. And this is the area that says that at the end of the day, what is most important is that relationship and that classroom environment and what happens with that teacher and those students. And fully recognizing that the principal in that school and the other leaders in that school support those teachers in their work. Right? We know from the research over decades that the teacher is most important in determining the success of the student during any given school year. It's the biggest factor we have. We also know over the years that a solid principal makes a huge difference in the ability of those teachers to do great work. And so our fourth major area of work is around improving the quality of teachers and our principals. And we have a lot of specific initiatives in that area. I do have a bit of time, so I'll touch on a couple and then open it up for some questions. First, why don't we touch on a couple of the controversial ones? So the first one is that we are doing an incredible amount of work in the way in which we evaluate the performance of our teachers and our leaders. And this year, right now, this year will be the first year that we implement a process that links student achievement with the evaluation of our principals and other leaders, and with our teachers and other educators. That measure of student achievement, how our students are growing, will now be a part of that evaluation. For those of you who follow this closely, you know that this is very difficult work. It is very controversial. And I would argue that Delaware is in a better place than any other state in the country on this right now. We have an incredible foundation to build this upon. We have a small enough state where we can put our arms around the challenges and we can sit face to face with people and figure this out together. And we have a system that we are implementing this year. We are at least a year ahead of most other states. And in some cases, we are light years ahead of others who haven't even begun this work. And the core aspect of this work, in my mind, this is how I think about this, is that every single student, regardless of what family they're coming from, regardless of what school they're walking into, and regardless of where they're currently performing, whether they're performing here or here, every single student should walk into school in the beginning of the school year and walk into school every day after that first day and expect to learn and expect to grow. And every parent should expect that. And so this really becomes about ensuring that an evaluation of our teachers and our leaders and our educators includes the growth of students, the academic growth of students. Are the students learning more? Are they performing better? So we have built this new evaluation system, this new aspect of the system. There's a lot of other parts that people get evaluated on, right? Not just the results, but this new aspect, we have built it on that fundamental belief that the growth of students is most important, that every student has the right to grow academically, and we need to measure that. Second piece, and I'll couple to that, is we are in a position here in Delaware where we have an assessment system that's new. It's a couple years old now, that measures growth of students over time. Very few other states have anything like this. Right? But for those of you who have kids in public school right now, you know that they take an assessment at the beginning of the school year. It tells them how they did immediately. They actually get a piece of paper that same day, and they can bring it home. And my daughter comes home and says, I got a 719, right? The kids all know this now. They know their numbers, and it tells them how they're doing, strengths and weaknesses. They get that at the beginning of the school year. At the end of the school year, they take another assessment, and it tells us how much they grew. And not only is that fantastic and way ahead of many other states, but our assessment is adaptive in nature, and here's what that means. That if a student sits down to take the assessment, next week my daughter will take hers, my son will take his, they'll sit down and take the assessment, and they start to get questions wrong, question 1, wrong, question 2, wrong, the questions will get easier. And if the student gets the questions right, the questions will get harder. So it's adaptive in nature, and it is able to target where the student is at in terms of their reading and math skills, and then it tells you that number. And it tells you those strengths and weaknesses. Not only is that hugely important to our teachers who now know where their students are at, but then it's hugely important for investing our children in their own learning. And it tells them where they're at. They can engage in that. They can goal set around that. I got a 719. My goal this year is an 800. And the way that I'm going to get to that 800 is I'm going to do these 4 things every day in my class. The student can say that. They can own that growth and that learning. Right? That's rare. Believe it or not, it's rare in the country. And our teachers and parents and principals all get that information too and can help serve those needs of those students. One other initiative to touch on that was very difficult a little over a year ago, and we've made huge strides in and need to continue to make huge strides in. And it's called, most people talk about it in the space as the PLCs, and it stands for Professional Learning Communities, and all that really means is that you're providing a space for educators to meet together and to plan and work based on how their students are doing. The bottom line is that you provide 90 minutes a week for teachers to come together with data on how their students are doing and plan what they're going to do next. Okay, that's the simplest way to say it. But many of our schools struggled to make that a reality in years past. They couldn't find the 90 minutes, or they had a difficult time negotiating those 90 minutes with the association, or they had a difficult time getting the schedule right so that the teachers who taught the same students could all be in the same room together. And all of that work over the last 2 years came together, and now every single school has those 90 minutes. Some more, actually, but they have at least 90 minutes for teachers to come together around how their students are doing and determine what they're going to do next. We had a chance to meet, I personally had a chance to meet with all 19 districts in the month of June as I came in. And the number one reason that the district leadership and principals cited for the gains that they made in performance this last year were those PLC times. That at the end of the day, if we can empower teachers, provide them with an opportunity to meet and plan, give them those resources of the data, and then let them work, get out of their way, let them plan, and let them execute. This is a journey. It doesn't always look that way in a school, and it's pretty messy work. But we'll get there, and we'll get towards a more empowered environment where we have the right data in place, where we have great pipelines of teachers, and where we have great pipelines of principals, and where then those people work together to constantly drive their own improvement.